Hello there. In 1991, writer of speculative fiction George R. R. Martin had written short stories, novels, and television scripts. Started writing a science fiction novel called Avalon. During this, he had a vivid idea of a boy watching a man's beheading and then finding direwolves in snow. Martin decided to put Avalon aside and write a new book around his vivid idea. He would, however, be forced to put this idea aside for a few years because he needed to return to Hollywood as ABC were producing his proposed Doorways TV series. Doorways would never air. In 2001, George R. R. Martin said, "The first scene, chapter 1 of the first book, the chapter where they find the direwolf pups, just came to me out of nowhere. I was at work on a different novel, and suddenly I saw that scene. It didn't belong in the novel I was writing, but it came to me so vividly that I had to sit down and write it. And by the time I did, it led to a second chapter. And the second chapter was the Catalan chapter where Ned just came back. This would eventually become the novel A Game of Thrones, the first book of the best-selling multi-award-winning epic fantasy series A Song of Ice and Fire, which as of 2018 consists of A Game of Thrones, A Clash of Kings, A Storm of Swords 1, Steel and Snow, A Storm of Swords 2, Blood and Gold, A Feast for Crows, A Dance of Dragons 1, Dreams and Dust, and A Dance of Dragons 2, After the Feast, with 2 upcoming novels, The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring. The latter will conclude the series. George R. R. Martin's fantasy world has expanded beyond the printed page and into other mediums, such as comic books and video games. In fact, Ice and Fire has become so popular that a children's novella written by Martin and published in 1980 is advertised as being part of the Ice and Fire world, even though Martin says that it isn't. Get excited, Warner Brothers is going to turn it into an animated movie. In January 2006, television producers David Benioff and D.B. Weiss wanted to turn George R. R. Martin's Ice and Fire series into a television series after a 5-hour pitch meeting with Martin. He accepted. Everyone agreed that Martin's epic fantasy series would be unfilmable as a feature. Benioff said, "A fantasy movie of this scope financed by a major studio would almost certainly need a PG-13 rating. That means no sex, no blood, no profanity. Fuck that." In 2011, the first season of Game of Thrones would air on HBO and receive critical acclaim. Game of Thrones is now reaching its 8th and final season. With all that now out of the way, let's review it from the start. The first season of Game of Thrones was produced on a budget between $50 and $60 million, so the producers were obviously taking this seriously. The series looks beautiful. Or ugly. There's a great amount of detail put into the sets and the armor and the props and the mythology. It's a dirty, dangerous world where lots of things can kill you. The series sports an impressive cast, featuring established actors such as Lena Headey, Nicola Coster-Waldau, Charles Dance, Roger Allam, David Bradley, Michelle Fairley, Sean fucking Bean, and Peter fucking Dinklage! And that's just season 1, as well as actors that would prove themselves here and elsewhere, such as Sophie Turner, Kit Harington, Emilia Clarke, and Jason Momoa. You may recognize some of these actors from other fantasy films. Sean Bean portrayed Boromir in Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings. Michelle Fairley and David Bradley appeared in Harry Potter, and Peter Dinklage appeared in The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian. While Game of Thrones is, at its core, a fantasy series, it's also very much a genre bender. Yes, it's primarily a fantasy. It's not set in Europe, but Westeros. There's a 700-foot wall separating ice demons from the Seven Kingdoms. There are fossilized dragon eggs and black magic. But it also incorporates horror, drama, political thriller, action, and even porn. One of the actresses even acted in porn. All of these genre elements work well with each other. And though it would be hard for me to call Game of Thrones in any way a comedy, it can be funny sometimes.
Before you go, you will call on Lord and Lady Stark and offer your sympathies.
What good will my sympathies do then?
None, but it is expected of you. Your absence has already been noted.
The boy means nothing to me. Oh, I can't stand the wailing of women.
One word, and I hit you again.
I'm telling Mother.
Go. Tell her. But first you will get to Lord and Lady Stark, and you will fall on your knees in front of them and tell them how very sorry you are, that you are at their service and that all your prayers are with them. Do you understand?
You can't.
Game of Thrones creates a very tangible world. You feel like you can touch the worlds of Winterfell, that you can feel the cold of the land beyond the wall, that you can walk through the streets of King's Landing. You may pick up some inspiration from our real world that Martin had placed into his fantasy world. The Targaryen's legacy of brother-sister marriage is a reference to the same practice among ancient Egyptian pharaohs. The faith of the Seven has some obvious Christianity comparisons. The old gods could be a reference to paganism. The first book's viewpoint characters were a Night's Watch Ranger, Eddard Stark, Catelyn Stark, Jon Snow, Sansa Stark, Arya Stark, Bran Stark, Tyrion Lannister, and Daenerys Targaryen. Though these characters do get the appropriate amount of screen time, the TV series devotes some time to other characters that wouldn't become points of view until later, such as Cersei and Jaime Lannister, Theon Greyjoy, and Barristan Selmy, as well as characters that would never become points of view, such as Loras Tyrell, Renly Baratheon, Peter Baelish, Varys the Spider, or Viserys Targaryen. The TV series makes a few other small changes from the book, but as an adaptation it's probably the most faithful. Game of Thrones is exceptionally violent. Whenever you see someone get stabbed, you feel it. When you hear the sound of blood, you squirm. When a character screams, you feel their pain. It is a world where anyone can die. To the shock of many. I remember how shocked I was when I first saw episode 9. George R.R. Martin would write one episode for each season until season 5 so that he could focus more on writing the books, which still aren't complete. No rush though. No rush. The Game of Thrones theme, composed by German composer Ramin Djawadi, is nothing short of iconic, in the same vein as the themes for Star Wars, Indiana Jones, or Superman. Game of Thrones is a brutal, passionate series made by passionate and talented people. The performances are all great, and everything feels real. If you haven't yet seen Game of Thrones, watch it and become obsessed. And if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to return for when I review Season 2. Sayonara.